The following podcast is a little fiery but mostly peaceful. If you're an automaton, turn away now and shelter in place. If you're a Catholic ready to renew your prescriptions of red pills and white pills, stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Catholics Aren't Zombies. I'm your host, Chris Munir. Delighted to have you again. Do you consider yourself to be a patient person? You see, many of us struggle mightily with this virtue, and it is a virtue. It's one of the 64. It's one of the most important ones. Much of the time, we lose sight of the fact that things can and do change if we wait patiently enough, though. So we have this struggle where we think that everything we're experiencing at the present time is doomed to last that way forever. It's usually because we fail to exercise patience and just tough it out a little bit. We fail to see that, well, if you just wait, even if you do nothing, in fact, usually when you do nothing, the miserable circumstances that have stricken you, one way or the other, will in fact subside. This too will pass, as our Lord says. This is especially true about politics. We think that nobody ever has a change of heart politically. We think that so-and-so, oh, they're such a rotten person. We almost deny the possibility of redemption these days. These political villains, we all have them. We all have the folks we don't like. But we seem to harbor this grudge, I think. We forget to love our neighbor, love our enemy. And I know that's tough. I'm not telling you that I'm perfect at it either. But we forget that, and in doing so, I think we forget that there are a lot of great redemption stories. People do have a change of heart politically, at least once in a while. But we seem to think that it never, ever happens. But what if I told you there was once upon a time, in the early 60s, where Hillary Clinton was a conservative and Ronald Reagan was a liberal at exactly the same time? Wrap your head around that. Wow, really? No, that's impossible. That's exactly backwards. There's no way. But it's true. Or it's pretty close. I did a little digging into this earlier. See, Hillary Clinton, she was a member of the Republican Party and had conservative beliefs all the way to the late 60s, I believe. Right around the time of the sexual revolution and all the weirdo stuff, civil rights. Once that had reached its fever pitch, in the late 60s, that's when she changed. And later on, she met Bill, and I think she was First Lady of Arkansas in the 70s and all that. But even as early as 1964, she would have been a teenager. She was campaigning for the campaign of Barry Goldwater, who was the Republican candidate for president running up against Lyndon Johnson. You know, our buddy, right? Not my buddy, not a friend of the church. She was running with a fairly good conservative candidate. He's one of the better ones we've had in the entire 20th century, Barry Goldwater. Not perfect, nobody is. So her early pre-wacko years as a teenager were conservative. That was 1964. Ronald Reagan was a member of the Democratic Party until 1962. So I believe there was probably, maybe it was just a year or so in Hillary Clinton's early teenage years, where she maybe just first started thinking about politics. She would have been a conservative at the same time, right before Ronald Reagan was about to ditch and abandon his crazy Hollywood leftism. My, how things have changed. Because things do change. We lose sight of it. We get caught up in the depression and misery of our current plight, which right now is really bad. But we lose sight of the fact that if you give something a few weeks, a few months, maybe it's years, maybe it's even decades, I don't know. But if you give it some time, things do change, and they change dramatically. Think how fast we went from not even having an airplane, what was it, 1911, Wright brothers, to sending a rocket up to the moon, 1969. That's not even 3/4 of a century, barely over half a century. And we did that. I know there's people out there that don't even think we landed on the moon. I'm not going to get into that. Just assume we did, crying out loud. But things do change rather rapidly. And the key to being able to endure the pain and understand what's really going on is to embrace the virtue of patience. That way, you don't lose hope. Big takeaway, things change, sometimes very dramatically, if we hang in there long enough. Now, the virtue of patience ties into another really good concept. This is going to be the second half of the show, if you will. It's called delayed gratification. Basically the same thing, But it shows how we got to plant the seed and get it to grow. We got to wait a little bit for us to be blessed with good things. So many examples of this. We learn this as children, though. As a matter of fact, I'm reminded that there were these experiments they did. I think they did these in the 90s with cupcakes. And they'd test children, They'd say, hey, here you go. Here's a cupcake. Here's one cupcake. Look how delicious. Pink frosting, moist. Oh, man, you want this cupcake, especially as a kid. You either want that or a big thing of ice cream. Well, you can have this cupcake now, or, again, this is what they submitted to the children. You can have this one now, or if you wait 1 hour, I'm going to give you 2 cupcakes. And so it was a test to see which kid, 8 years old, whatever, how many of the children would wait the hour to get double the prize. Some kids do, some kids don't. The moral of the story is hopefully by the time you're an adult, you can make the rational calculation if you really like cupcakes, assuming you don't want to get cavities and fat and all that. If you really like cupcakes, well, darn, just wait the simple hour, go do something else, anything else, and get 2 of them. Double the prize. Who wouldn't do that? Again, it's called delayed gratification. There are some very important spiritual components to this. This is how you get into heaven. This is the story of the gospel. Because if you think about it, like St. Teresa of Avila, she likens our stay on this earth like a night in a bad motel. It's not supposed to be a party. Life is a gigantic fast. It's a mortification. It's designed to make us worthy of heaven. And it's delayed gratification. Put up with the crummy doldrums of life. Sometimes it's boring. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes your neighbor makes you want to body slam them into the wall. That happens a lot. But it's part of this ultimately brief. It feels long, but it's ultimately brief. Delayed gratification, preparing us to be able to go to heaven. By the way, if we screw it up, you get to go to purgatory, and then it takes even longer. So make the most out of it now, right? Why are we here? Why are we here in this life? To learn how to love. I touched upon this a little bit in an earlier episode. You won't learn to love if you get it without effort or patience. If you don't have to wait for it, you probably won't like it that much. You probably won't care that much about it. Adam and Eve, they couldn't wait. Eve had to have that apple. She didn't have to grab that. Why in the world did she let a snake talk her into going and grabbing that apple? I mean, pre-fall, pre-original sin, Adam and Eve would have been a heck of a lot smarter than we are now because our intelligence and intellect is completely dulled by sin. Yet here you have Eve, who should have been way smarter than us. She got tricked by a snake to go take an apple, to go bite into that juicy apple, that forbidden fruit. All she had to do was go talk to God. Hey, why is there a snake bugging me over here? Hey, what's going on? All it would have taken was a little bit of patience, step back, calculate what's going on, back up and punt, whatever metaphor you want to use, and the whole problem could have been averted. But in the midst of that whole drama there, that original sin, a big chunk of it was a lack of patience. Now, I'm not a theologian if I'm butchering this or maybe not giving the full treatment. All right, you know the rule, you know the drill by now. I concede to what the church teaches. But to me, this seems like a pretty obvious example. No patience, no delayed gratification. Gimme, gimme, gimme right now. It's like a child that just picks up things off the table when you tell them not to. That's all it really was. There's so many examples contrary to delayed gratification in our lives. There's so many shortcuts in life. Remember, Catholics aren't zombies because zombies are literally the most short-term thinkers around. What do? They run around in this twisted pursuit of brains all the time. Brains, and they got to have them right away. And if they don't, they lose their mind, what's left of it. We're not like that. But we act like it whenever we slip into sin, whenever we forget that, hey, there's more important things at stake than immediate pleasure. So what do? We turn to porn. We want that quick dopamine hit, that quick serotonin release, whatever it is. We can't wait around for something that's as distant and seemingly so unobtainable like holiness. No, we're going to go ahead and take the shortcut and just play around with porn. Why not? That's good. Material things, it's a very obvious, easy way to fall into this problem. Free stuff from the government. So rather than having a free market, which involves, putting in your labor and waiting a little while and, achieving success, which is delayed gratification, no, we want free stuff from the government. Give me that, come on. I don't want to work for it. Even though it's really not as hard as you make it out to be or as hard as people tend to make it out to be, still, nope, want the shortcuts, want the free stuff. How do we get better at embracing gratification? Well, one of the biggest weapons in our arsenal is fasting. Fasting is how it's done. And this is not just with food. This is with everything as much as possible. Anything that brings you little quick delights in life, you got to think about it. Do I have an attachment to it? And if you do, it's probably something you should fast from. So that way, if for no other reason, ultimately down the road, you'll learn to like it more because you're not just constantly hitting yourself with it over and over. Ooh, quick little satisfactions. It's not really all that good for you. Fasting teaches us the mechanism for growth. We have to learn how to wait patiently in order for the gestation of good things, for these things to develop. You don't eat your seed crop. You wait for the crops to grow, then you harvest them. But don't be stupid about it, though. Everybody should be fasting, but if you do it too much and too excessively, it can destroy you. It can be very prideful. So watch out. Try to consult your pastor on how to do it right. Don't undertake any crazy extreme fasts or mortification that you're not prepared to do just because you think it's cool or you saw it in a book. It might have been cool for whoever you read about when they were doing it. It was cool for them. Might not be the right thing for you. And one way to avoid overdoing or underdoing things is just to embrace the liturgical seasons in the Catholic liturgical calendar. Know all the feast days, know when the ember days are, know the penitential time, so you'll pick up on the ebb and flow. We're not just always fasting real hard. We're not just always feasting and partying. There's ups, there's downs. You plant the seeds, you wait, you harvest. The church works the same way as farming, basically. Delayed gratification. So to recap, pray for the virtue of patience, because we struggle with this a lot. Sear into your mind the concept of delayed gratification. Learn how or why you should fast, because it's what separates children from mature adults. But don't go overboard into rigorism, puritanism, or any complex that involves extreme deprivation. If you do all that, I think you'd be able to address some of this consternation we're feeling. We think that our situations are hopeless, our political quagmire that we're in. We think it's never going to end. We're doomed. We're heading for the gallows. They're going to feed us to the lions. Or they might. I don't know. I'm not going to predict the future. But it might just be the case that we got to wait this out. Patience, guys. I'm telling you. At least give patience a chance. So if you enjoyed this, appreciate it. That's the end of the show. Check out my blog, ditchthestateloveholychurch.com. Go on Amazon and buy my book, Caesar Vacantism, Rendering to Caesar When Caesar Goes Nuts. Kindle, paperback. And other than that, I hope you have a great one. Don't stay safe because that's for wussies. And bye-bye.